Welcome back. A new trend is reportedly taking over workplaces in recent times. Quiet quitting, as it's called, has nothing to do with quitting, but everything to do with the way one chooses to work and why. For more on this, I have Nicolas ROCCA from Radio France Internationale. Nicolas, it's great to have you back.
Great to be back, Sunny.
I also have Alex Christian over in London live on the line. Alex, it's a pleasure.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Right, Nicolas, we'll start here then. Let's begin with a few words on the origin of the trend quiet quitting.
Well, it started on TikTok with a video posted around the end of July by an American TikToker, basically saying that work is not life and that your life shouldn't be limited by the professional aspects of it. Since then, I mean, it has evolved. As I checked yesterday, there were 115 million views on the hashtag quiet quitting and even more on similar hashtag. My understanding of it is that the idea is that you should not limit yourself to work and that you should work the amount of hours that's expected of you, but not more, and try to find a healthy balance between your professional and your personal life. What is funny is that we have seen a similar tendency in China a few years ago with a phenomenon called tanping, which literally means lying down, and I mean it's overall criticism of the working culture in China and maybe a bit more broader of the social culture of China. Basically, the idea was like, we are young Chinese that don't want to focus our life only on work. We don't want to necessarily buy the new apartment. We don't want to necessarily be married in the time the society tells us to. And it's a global discourse, a global speech that is trying to focus on a healthier work, personal life balance.
Right. And Alex, you've covered this trend quite a bit yourself. And in one of your more recent articles, you say quiet quitting is nothing new and has been happening for decades. Do you care to elaborate?
Yeah, well, if you think about it, disengagement amongst the workforce isn't new. In generations past, workers had less social mobility than they do today. There were fewer jobs and opportunities to move, and there's also greater stigma attached to quitting and changing companies in the first place. So a degree of quiet quitting, even though it wasn't called that back then, but almost like not being fully engaged at work and not going the extra mile, it made sense because for whatever reason, workers felt stuck. And I think that's what's happened now. Workers feel stuck, so they're quiet quitting. What's happened more in recent times, before the pandemic, is we saw like a rise of coasting, just not going for the extra mile for your employer for whatever reason. And it's usually down to personal reasons, your personal life. People want to craft work more around their lives, around whatever is going on in their personal life. But I think what's happened following COVID, because it's been a challenge for a lot of people, and it's been it's gone on for quite a while now. I think it's just taken on a new dimension. It's been packaged up as quiet quitting, and obviously it's gone viral on TikTok. So although it's nothing new, the packaging is very different, and that's why it's taken off, I think.
Right, and beyond the UK, Nicolas, the trend is also taking tangible shape over in France, I understand. What has been the public response there? I mean, are quiet quitters regarded as workers seeking work-life balance, as you mentioned earlier, or are they simply slackers?
Well, I mean, what said Alex reminds me that in France, we've seen headlines of newspapers saying French people don't want to work. Every 5 years, it comes back and over again. But this recent trend, I mean, it's been talked to between young people. Actually, when I was in Paris this summer, I discussed the matter with other friends, and funnily enough, we identify maybe quiet quitters more as people that are in the companies we work with, that are maybe a bit more age and not especially Gen Zs or those types of generation, but people that are in a comfortable situation, that know they won't get fired anyway, that just, you know, are not willing to put the effort in anymore. And I mean, definitely those people are not going to be viewed positively in the company, because maybe, you know, the work that they don't do, that they don't push themselves forward. If other people do, I mean, some colleagues might you know, consider that they're going to take the work that the others are not doing. But I mean, as a more global issue, I think in France we really value our our personal life, there's like very strict laws in matters of the amount of vacation that we need to have, the amount of work we can do a week. 35 hours of work a week can be pushed actually to 40, and 5 weeks of vacation per year. So I think people that are trying to seek a healthy balance between personal life and work life are not necessarily seen negatively, and I think it's an overall trend that's happening in France, and people are questioning the use of putting all your life into your professional life.
Right, I see. Alex, Harvard's Business Review claims that quiet quitting is about bad bosses and not bad employees. How do you respond to this assessment based on your coverage of the trend thus far?
I would generally agree with that. I think there can be an unfortunate narrative that for whatever reason people don't want to work and that's they're being lazy, and that's simply not the case. If a worker was to be lazy, that would mean, and they decide to quiet quit just because they don't want to do the job, because out of laziness. Think about it, that's 8 hours a day minimum, 5 days a week typically. That's a very, very long time to do something that you're not enjoying. To me, I think that sounds like torturous. So I don't think it's a case of people being lazy. There is a reason why someone decides, you know what, I think I need to quiet quit. I need to not give my all to this job. And it's usually down to underlying causes, and that can result from bad management. In my research, I spoke to one case study for a BBC article, and it's exactly what happened with her. She was going the extra mile continuously at work, and then her boss, she felt her hard work wasn't being acknowledged by her boss, and so she decided to make her mental health a priority and just take things easy, especially following COVID. And another thing is, I think we saw during the pandemic, especially early on, definitely in the UK and the US, companies seemed to make work-life balance like a priority, and there was more and more conversations around mental health. And I think there's like a general sense that that's kind of gone away now, and it's almost like back to normal. It's back to the old working practices that weren't really working before. And I think what's predominantly happened is it's gone to like a hybrid setting where work is 2 days a week is at home, 3 days a week is in the office, and apart from that, everything remains the same. So I do feel like there is a sense of like employers did do quite a bit at the start of the pandemic, but they've kind of let it slip over time. And I think quiet quitting is a reaction to that, in many cases, I think, bad management.
Right. And Nicholas, moving forward, what do you suppose has been accelerating the quiet quitting trend in recent times?
So Alex has pointed out the pandemic, and I think it's one of the main aspects, because everybody thought about, because there's been lockdown in many countries, and so basically you're working from home, and there's no boundaries anymore, no like concrete boundary between your work life and your personal life. So I think it has been a period where a lot of people ask themselves questions about the use, of putting so much effort into work, and it has also, the barrier has kind of disappeared, and your boss knows that you're at home, basically, and he might text you at 9 p.m. Do you answer? What do you do? It's always, hard questions, and I think pandemic has raised all of those questions. In the US, we've seen also a tendency of people quitting their jobs, like a huge amount of people. I think it's something around 500,000 for the first trimester of this year. So we can feel that there's a global trend of people feeling that they don't want to invest that much into work, and that work is not the only aspect of life. And I think there's a generational also aspect about all this, because in many countries, including South Korea, the Gen Z generation, or the generation born in the 1990s, or they discover things that other generation didn't know. I mean, unemployment, difficulties of having a job that they are really interested in and that they really want to be invested in, difficulties also to see the economic rewards of sacrificing yourself to work, because it's harder to buy an apartment, it's harder to start a family. So I think it's it's a lot of different, factors that is pushing those issues forwards.
Right, unfortunately. Alex, do you suppose a more flexible approach perhaps to working arrangements by employers themselves will perhaps serve to render this trend more productive, if I may?
Yes, I think much of quiet quitting is a feeling of lacking control and feeling stuck. And as I mentioned before, deeper underlying issues. So if employers were to afford greater flexibility to their teams and give them the greater perception of control, that would make sense to me. And there's a continuous amount of research and academic literature that says if someone feels they're in control, they're going to be happier and more engaged. So to me, it seems like a no-brainer. If you were to afford workers greater flexibility, it's going to make them happier and more engaged with their work, and they don't need to quiet quit because their life already, their work already is crafted around their life a lot more. And another thing we saw during the pandemic is employees were afforded this flexibility. It may not have suited everyone working from home during the peak of COVID, but there is definitely some flexibility for workers who didn't like open plan offices, who didn't like commuting. And there's definitely a feeling that's been taken away now that we have returned to office mandates, and like hybrid working models are seen to be like the default working practice. So when someone feels like something's been taken away from them, they can be upset about that. And again, this goes into quiet quitting. I feel a feeling of being stuck and lacking control. So yeah, it's a no-brainer to me. If you give workers more autonomy and trust, they're going to be happier.
Right. Nicholas, some say quiet quitting, it's not available to all workers and speaks to perhaps the broader issue of equality. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think, first of all, it doesn't apply to every sector. Not everybody is in a long-term contract and can kind of offer, have the safety net of quiet quitting. And I mean, the negative aspect of quiet quitting can be that you're not gonna maybe have that pay raise or that you're not gonna get promoted. So some people that are in a really difficult financial situation, it seems logical that they might not be able to, voice in this way their concern about their work, even though they're probably, for a lot of them, not happy at work. Yeah, I think it doesn't apply to every sector. If I talk about what I know the best, which would be like the journalism industry, especially in France. If you're a young person in journalism, you can't afford to quite quit, because if you do so, you're never going to have a contract. You're never going to be able to have a good financial situation, because there's simply too much competition, and the ones that are going to be rewarded by the employers are going to be the ones that are going to work that extra hour, that are going to show that they want it more. I mean, I'm not saying it's something that's healthy or it's something that's good, but it's just the reality of the situation in this industry and in probably many more.
Right, and staying with that, Alex, simply speaking then, are there jobs that are more prone perhaps to quiet quitting? And if so, what are the broader implications of this reality, do you think?
It's a very good question. I think it's such an emerging trend that there's no real hard data to show where it's happening in what sectors. But I think quiet quitting, it's a phenomenon where someone has lower motivation to actually quit and just stay where they are. So to me, that suggests it's predominantly in professional settings and knowledge work, where, as Nicholas was saying, you're on a comfortable salary. So you don't necessarily want to leave that salary and quit. And the other thing is where I think it's predominantly office-based work, is there's fewer tangible outputs of work compared to, say, a customer-facing role, or say in manufacturing, where you have tangible outputs. You can see if someone's productivity is massively slipped. I think in knowledge work, it's a lot harder to measure someone's productivity. So I think it's easier to get away with quiet quitting, if you will. And then the other thing is why I think it's predominantly in knowledge work and office-based jobs is it's hybrid and remote work. if you are away from the office at least 2 or 3 days a week, it's easier to quit because you don't have the boss looking at you so much. It's all digital and virtual, so it's easier to pull away and not give your extra mile, I think. So even though we can't say definitively where it's happening, I think it's likely to be mostly in professional settings.
Right. Nicholas, I should have actually started off with this basic question, but I wonder, is there a problem, though, of just working your wage, so to speak?
I mean, it shouldn't be a problem, but some people might point out that, it might affect the productivity or the creativity because people don't push, forward, don't do the extra mile. But I think the bigger issue is maybe presenteeism, the fact that people are going to stay at work longer just to show that, I'm here, I wanted more than the other colleagues, and that kind of, inner competition into the company. It's something that's definitely happening in France. From my understanding here in Korea, it's also something that in big companies, you have to show that you're staying late, you have to show that you're here. And I think that's far more dangerous for productivity and for, of course, mental health and motivation of the employees. I discussed with French friends that worked in the Netherlands or in Canada, where the work culture, at least in some companies, appear to be different. It's if you stay more at work, there it's considered that you're not productive enough because you should have done your work, you should have achieved your task in that amount of time, and if you stay more, it means that you're not productive. Of course, it's not a perfect system either, but it makes us think a bit outside of the box, and it's maybe healthier and gets employees more motivated because they know that I'm done by 4, so I should finish this and then go on with my personal life.
Right, and talking about personal life, Alex, I was wondering, do you suppose that quiet quitting ultimately, can it serve as perhaps a preventative measure against burnout, which is a problem here in Korea, and I'm sure there in the UK as well?
Yes, definitely. Ultimately, quiet quitting is recrafting the boundaries of work around life, and I think it's ultimately a mental health conversation. No one wants to have burnout and to feel exhausted. It has huge ramifications beyond your work, and it's a crippling effect on your personal life and your health. So I think that the rhetoric around quiet quitting, I remember the original TikTok, the user who posted it was saying quiet quitting is just like shutting down your laptop at 5 p.m. and not checking your emails beyond 5 p.m. And then to me, that just doesn't sound like quiet quitting. I just think those are healthy working practices. You don't always have to go beyond your contracted hours. And I think there were many unhealthy working practices before COVID, such as like always on presenteeism. But I think that's really ramped up now, as Nicholas was saying, those physical boundaries of the office have been removed. So you used to have that hard like 5 p.m, 6 p.m. cutoff where people would start to go home. That's been removed now with digital work. You can always check your emails wherever you go. It follows you around in your pocket. So I think quiet quitting is to prevent burnout and to just redress those lines between work and life. And the other thing is, I think people feel like they've run a marathon through COVID and it hasn't actually ended. Like that finish line, it always goes, it's further and further over the horizon.
Of course. And
I just think people are exhausted. So it makes sense where some people might think, I've given my all at work recently. For the last 2 years, it's been really difficult. I'm just going to look after me for now.
Right, so definitely well-being over work then. All right, Alex, thank you so much for your thoughts and your time. And Nicholas here in the studio, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.